The college campus was buzzing with the kind of energy that you can only find in a place overflowing with young dreams and ambitions. That's where I met Ethan. We were both gunning for the same scholarship, the kind that not only covered tuition but also bragging rights. It was big. It was what every nerd in our batch was after, and boy did we clash over it. Seriously, Ethan, you think you can outdo me on the thesis? Dream on, I'd scoff at him across the library, my eyes barely lifting from my laptop. He'd just grin that annoyingly confident smirk that drove me nuts. Ava, I'll see you at the finish line, better bring your A game, he'd retort. We were both stubborn as hell, each convinced we were the rightful winner of that grant. Our debates got so heated sometimes I thought we'd end up setting the lecture halls on fire with our arguments. Your argument on the economic theories is so half-baked, I could serve it for breakfast, Ethan once told me during a mock debate. The class had erupted in laughter, and I could feel my cheeks burning, not just from embarrassment, but from the raging fire to prove him wrong. Oh please, your so-called innovative perspective is just recycled trash. Heard it all before, I shot back, not missing a beat. It wasn't just about the scholarship. It was a battle of wits, pride, and unbeknownst to us at the time, a budding attraction that neither of us wanted to admit. Our rivalry was the talk of the campus. We were always at each other's throats, challenging one another to do better, be smarter. But as the final decision on the grant neared, something shifted between us. Maybe it was the late-night study sessions that ended in shared coffee breaks, or the way we'd inadvertently learn more about each other's lives beyond the books. You know, for a smartass, you're not that bad, I found myself saying one night as we left the library together, the campus quiet around us. Ethan chuckled, shoving his hands in his pockets. Look who's talking. I've seen you help the freshmen with their assignments, not the heartless competitor everyone thinks. It was strange, this new dynamic. Our banter softened, tinged with a reluctant respect that slowly melted into something warmer. When the day of the scholarship announcement came, we sat next to each other, an unspoken truth between us. May the best man or woman win, Ethan whispered, his hand brushing mine. I remember the rush of emotions when they called my name, but what stood out more was the genuine smile on Ethan's face. Guess you were the best man after all, he said, his laughter mingling with mine. From that day forward, our relationship took a new turn. We were still competitive, but it was different. We challenged each other to be better, supported each other's dreams. Our arguments turned into discussions, our banter into inside jokes. And somewhere along the line, we stopped being rivals and started being something more. Moving in together was the easiest decision we'd ever made. It felt like the natural next step, a testament to how far we'd come from those two hot-headed students who couldn't stand to be in the same room unless it was to argue over academic theories. Our friends were shocked. You two, really, they'd ask, disbelief written all over their faces. Yeah, really, we'd say, exchanging looks that spoke volumes of the journey we'd been on, from rivals to roommates to, dare I say, soulmates. Living with Ethan was like being in our little bubble. But bubbles are delicate, and ours was no exception, especially when it came to dealing with his folks. Martha and John were as traditional as they come, and our choice to live together without the whole marriage didn't sit well with them, not at all. It was like a broken record every time we saw them. You're living in sin, Ava. It's not right. Martha would start, her tone laced with disappointment and a touch of scorn. She was a pro at guilt trips, making sure to sprinkle in stories of her own purity. John and I didn't even kiss until we were married, can you imagine? I tried to keep my cool. Respect was important to me, but boy was it hard. Martha, times have changed. People don't wait for marriage to be together anymore. Ethan stood by me, bless him, but it was like talking to a wall with them. John would chime in, his voice heavy with a sense of betrayed values. We raised you better, Ethan. You're supposed to be a decent man, not swayed by this. That's what I was to them, never Ava, always this, as if I were some bad influence, instead of the person their son loved. Ethan tried to bridge the gap. Mom, Dad, I love Ava. We're happy. Can't you just be happy for us? But nope, it was like everything he said just bounced off them. Martha, with her knack for drama, would clutch at her pearls, literally. Happy? How can we be happy when you're living in sin? It's not right, Ethan. You know it's not. The worst part. Ethan was caught in the crossfire. His folks made it seem like I had him under some spell. You've changed, son. This isn't you, John would say, shaking his head as if Ethan was some puppet gone rogue. And me? I was trying not to lose it. I respected their beliefs, sure, but the constant judgment was a drag. I told Ethan as much. I get where they're coming from, but I'm not the enemy here. We're just living our lives. I know he'd sigh, looking like he was carrying the world on his shoulders. It's just, they're my parents. I wish they could see how good we are together. In the end, it felt like we were stuck in this loop. Us trying to live our lives, them seeing it as some personal affront. It was exhausting dealing with the endless lectures and the not-so-subtle digs at our life choices. But what could we do? They were his parents, and no amount of reasoning seemed to make a dent. So we kept on living our sinful life, hoping one day they'd come around, or at least stop making every dinner feel like a trial, where we were always found guilty. Just when I thought Martha and John's nagging couldn't get any worse, they hit us with a new plan. You both need guidance, Martha announced one evening, her tone more determined than ever. We've arranged for you to meet with Father Mike. He'll set you straight. Ethan and I exchanged a look, the kind that said, "Are you kidding me?" without needing words. Mom, really, we don't need a priest to tell us how to live our lives, Ethan tried to reason, his patience wearing thin. But Martha was on a mission, and when Martha got going, there was no stopping her. It's not up for discussion, Ethan. You're going, and that's final. It's for your own good. So there we were, a few days later, sitting uncomfortably in Father Mike's office, a cozy little room filled with religious books and those cliché inspirational posters. Father Mike was a kind-looking man, but the situation was just absurd. Now, I understand there's some concern about your living arrangements, Father Mike began, peering over his glasses at us. I bit my tongue, really wanting to say something snarky, but managed to keep it civil. We're fine, really. It's just that Ethan's parents are a bit traditional. Father Mike nodded, as if this wasn't the first time he'd been dragged into a family squabble. Marriage is a sacred union, but so is love and respect for one another. Are you two committed to each other? Ethan took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Yes, we are, completely. The priest smiled, then turned to some of his books, probably looking for some wise quote to throw at us. But before he could get into it, Ethan cut in. Look, Father, we appreciate what you're trying to do, but we're happy. Isn't that what matters? Father Mike looked at us, then after a long pause, he closed his book. You're right, happiness and commitment are what truly matter. Maybe it's not me who needs to guide you, but perhaps I can help your parents understand your choices. That meeting didn't magically fix everything, but it was a start, or so we thought. Martha and John thanked Father Mike for his time but seemed to ignore the whole, happiness and commitment are what truly matter part. Instead, they focused on this sacred union bit. See, even Father Mike agrees. You two need to get married, Martha insisted, completely missing the point. Ethan and I just looked at each other, the reality of the situation sinking in. No matter what we did, it seemed like his parents would never be satisfied. It was like banging our heads against a brick wall. Let's just get married and get it over with, I muttered to Ethan on our way home, half joking but also half desperate for some peace. Ethan sighed, the weight of the world on his shoulders. I'll do anything if it means they'll finally leave us alone. Little did we know that decision to give in would open a whole new can of worms. But at that moment, all we wanted was a break from the constant pressure. If a wedding was what it took, then so be it. The wedding was something straight out of a fairy tale, or so I thought. I pulled out all the stops to make sure it was an event that would make Martha and John happy, given their traditional views. The church was decked out in flowers, the music was solemn yet uplifting, and I was dressed in a gown that was the very definition of elegance. Even Martha, who could rival a statue when it came to showing emotions, shed a few tears during the ceremony. But of course, there was a catch. My friends, who'd been my rock through this whole ordeal, came dressed to kill. They looked amazing, but apparently, their style was a bit too much for Martha. Did you see how they're dressed? She whispered to me right in the middle of the reception. It's a wedding, not a nightclub. I could feel my cheeks burning, not sure if it was from anger or embarrassment. Martha, they're my friends. They're here to celebrate with us. Can we just focus on that? I said. She clucked her tongue, shaking her head like I just failed the world's easiest test. I'm just saying, a little modesty wouldn't hurt. After we caved and got hitched, Martha and John must have thought they snagged an all-access pass to our place. No kidding, they started popping by every single day. If you ever needed a live demo of what too much looks like, this was it. One Saturday morning, there's a knock that could wake the dead. I'm talking 6:00 a.m., and these two are at our door like they're about to miss a flight. Ethan, barely awake, trudges to the door, and there they are, bright and chipper. Good morning, we thought we'd spend the day together, Martha chirps, pushing past Ethan like it's the most normal thing in the world. I'm in the kitchen, drowning my sorrows in coffee when John starts critiquing my choice of breakfast. You know, a hearty breakfast is important. Is this even food? He's eyeballing my cereal like it's from another planet. Eggs and bacon were fine for you, right? I mutter under my breath, not in the mood to start my day off with a lecture on nutritional values. Then Martha, bless her heart, decides to give me a rundown on cleanliness. Ava dear, have you considered organizing your cupboards a bit more, and maybe using some coasters? Water rings on the table are such an eyesore. I'm biting my tongue so hard it's a miracle I still have it. Ethan sees me clenching my fist and jumps in. Mom, Dad, you know we really appreciate your visits, but maybe we could do with a bit of space. You'd think he'd ask them to move to Mars by the looks on their faces. Space? But we're family, we just want to be close to you too. John says, utterly baffled by the concept of personal boundaries. Martha's on the verge of tears now, playing the guilt card like a pro. Do you not want us here after everything we've done for you? It's like walking on eggshells. You try to set some ground rules and suddenly you're the villain in their soap opera. I hit my breaking point on a Thursday evening, the kind that started with the same old surprise visit from Martha and John and ended with me locking myself in the bathroom just to get a minute of peace. This has got to stop, I muttered to Ethan as we lay in bed, the moon casting a soft glow through our window. Your folks are driving me nuts. It's like we're living in a reality show, but there's no escaping the cameras. Ethan, looking as worn out as I felt, let out a long sigh. I know babe, it's getting to me too. What do we do though? They're my parents. Uh-huh. But this is our home. We can't keep living like this, I shot back, my frustration bubbling over. We need space, real space. Maybe we should move. Like actually move. Ethan propped himself up on one elbow, eyeing me like I just suggested we join the circus. Move? Like pack up everything and just go? Why not? I was half serious, half desperate. Your parents can't drop by if we're not here, right? The idea seemed radical, even to me, but the more we talked about it, the less crazy it seemed. We started to imagine a life where dinner wasn't interrupted by unannounced visits or our weekends weren't planned around avoiding his parents. Okay, let's say we do this. Where would we go? Ethan asked, the gears in his head turning. I don't know. Somewhere close enough to keep our jobs but far enough that it's not just a hop, skip, and a jump for your mom and dad. I suggested, warming to the idea. The decision felt right, almost liberating. We started house hunting online, looking for a place that could be our fresh start, far away from unannounced morning visits and constant criticism. It wasn't long before we found it. A cozy little house in a neighboring city. It was perfect, and the best part? I could buy it with the money I'd inherited from my grandmother. This wasn't just a new house. It was a statement. My money, my rules. A fresh slate on our terms. They're going to flip, Ethan said, dreading the conversation. Mom's going to think we're abandoning them. Maybe I'm conceited, but we're not doing this to hurt them. We're doing it for us, for our sanity. They'll just have to understand. The conversation went as well as we'd feared. Tears, accusations, and a lot of guilt being thrown around. But we stood our ground, knowing this was the right move for us. We did it, I said to Ethan as we signed the papers, the weight of the world lifting off our shoulders. The move was hectic, filled with boxes and goodbyes and the promise of peace. We kept our jobs, commuting a bit further than before, but every mile was worth it for the tranquility that greeted us at the end of the day. Our new life in the neighboring city was everything we'd hoped for. We fell back into our old rhythms, enjoying the quiet and the privacy we'd missed so much. The in-laws, we kept in touch through the internet, a safe buffer that allowed us to control the narrative and the visits. It was a compromise, but a necessary one. Our calls were polite, the conversations brief and infrequent, but it was enough to keep the peace. Just when Ethan and I thought we'd found our slice of peace in the new city, life decided to throw us a curveball. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where you just want to lay around and enjoy the calm. That's when the doorbell rang, shattering the silence. Who could that be? I murmured, not expecting anyone. We weren't exactly social butterflies, especially not here, not yet. Ethan shrugged, equally puzzled, and strolled over to the door. When he opened it, his puzzled look morphed into outright disbelief. There on our doorstep stood Martha and John, each with a suitcase bigger than the last time they criticized our breakfast choices. Surprise, Martha exclaimed, her smile wide enough to split her face. John just nodded, his usual taciturn self, but even he seemed to wear a small grin. How did you, why? Ethan's eloquence was gone, replaced by staccato confusion. We've decided to move in, Martha declared, as if announcing they'd won the lottery. It's time we all live together as a family should. My mind raced. This had to be a joke, a very bad one. Move in with us? I echoed, hoping I misunderstood. Yes, dear. We sold our house. We're here to stay, Martha said, pushing past Ethan, making herself at home as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell on our doorstep. Ethan and I exchanged a look of sheer panic. You can't just decide to move in with us, I managed to say, finally finding my voice. Martha and John weren't just shocked at our refusal. They were outraged. You can't possibly expect us to leave. We're family, and this house, it's as much our son's as it is yours, Martha asserted, her voice a mix of indignation and disbelief. John, usually more reserved, joined in with a surprising fierceness. Exactly. Ethan's our son. And you're living here thanks to him. You're just a freeloader making decisions that aren't yours to make. I could barely contain my laughter, not because it was funny, but because of the sheer audacity. Ethan's face was a picture of shock, turning to me with wide eyes as if to say, "Are they serious?" "Hold on a minute," I said, still chuckling, as I went to retrieve a folder from our home office. I flipped it open to a very important document, the deed to the house. I made sure they could see it clearly. See this? This house was bought with the money I inherited from my grandmother. I am the sole owner. So actually, it's entirely up to me who lives here. And you, I pointed squarely at Martha and John, are not staying. Martha's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while John's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. Ethan stepped beside me, a proud yet stern look on his face. You heard her. I bought this house, not me, not us. And we've decided together that moving in uninvited isn't an option. After I dropped the bombshell about owning the house, Martha tried to play her final card, all but declaring squatters' rights on account of Ethan living with me. He's our son. We have every right to be wherever he is. We're family, and that means we stay together, she announced, puffing up like a peacock. I couldn't help it. A laugh escaped me before I could clamp it down. This was it, the moment I'd been keeping close to the chest for just such an occasion. Well, here's a fun fact for you, I said, the smile on my face growing wider by the second. Ethan and I were not actually married. Not legally anyway. The wedding was for show, to get you off our backs about living in sin. The look on Martha and John's faces, priceless, like they'd swallowed lemons whole. What do you mean, not married? That whole ceremony. Martha's voice trailed off, her brain unable to compute. Yep, a ceremony without the paperwork. So technically, you're not my in-laws. I continued, gesturing around. And this, I gestured around, is my house. Ethan's just living with me. My rules, my decision, who stays and who goes. John's face went through 50 shades of red and embarrassment, battling for dominance. You can't just... That's not how things are done, he stuttered. Ethan stepped up then, his tone steady but firm. Mom, Dad, I love Ava, and I'm tired, so tired, of the way you've treated us, her especially. We did what we had to live our lives on our terms. It's time you went home, Martha. Not one to go down without a fight, Martha turned her frustration into a weapon. Ethan, you listen here, you're going to leave this woman and come with us. She's tricked you, manipulated you. But Ethan was unmovable, a rock in the storm. No, Mom, I'm staying with Ava. I love her, even if we're not married by your standards. It's my life, our life, and it's time you respected that. The standoff in our living room was tense, a silent battle of wills. But in the end, Martha and John had no choice but to leave. Their departure was a mix of rage and disbelief. As the door closed behind them, the silence that settled was profound. A mix of relief and the sobering realization of the bridge we just burned. Ethan and I looked at each other, a single thought between us. No matter what, we were in this together. After Martha and John huffed out of our place, tails between their legs, word got around through the grapevine that their big move was all a bluff. They never sold their house. It was just a ploy to muscle in on us, thinking they could pull one over and make themselves comfy at our expense. Can you believe that? The nerve of some people, I exclaimed. But hey, here we are, still in our own little slice of heaven, shaking our heads at the whole mess. Can you imagine if they actually had sold their house? I said to Ethan one evening, the two of us sprawled out on the couch, enjoying the peace and quiet. Ethan chuckled, a deep hearty sound that filled the room. That would have been a disaster. Good thing they're too attached to their precious home to actually go through with it. We got to talking about the future, just the two of us, figuring out where we go from here. So what do you think about making it official? You know, after if we're lucky enough to have a kid, Ethan asked, a bit hesitantly. I thought about it, turning the idea over in my mind. I guess it might make things simpler paperwork-wise. But you know, I don't need a piece of paper to tell me I'm yours. Yes, I feel the same. It's just us, as always has been, always will be. Screw anyone who thinks they can dictate how we live our lives, Ethan said, his voice firm with conviction. It was settled then. We'd cross that bridge when we came to it. But for now, we were content. Just Ava and Ethan against the world. No legal documents needed to validate what we had. Our love was the real deal, stamps in the passports or not. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, that feeling of us against the world only grew stronger. We were a team, and nothing, not even sneaky in-laws with their bizarre schemes, could tear us apart. As for Martha and John, well, they kept their distance. Maybe they learned their lesson, maybe not. But one thing was for sure. Ethan and I were untouchable, living our lives on our own terms, in our own time. The future looked bright from where we were sitting, a blank canvas ready to be filled with love, laughter, and maybe just maybe, the pitter-patter of tiny feet. But until then, we were just fine, enjoying the peace, thankful for every quiet moment we had together in our little sanctuary.
The smell of roast beef wafted through the air, but it only made my stomach churn. I gripped the edge of the mahogany dining table, trying to steady myself as another wave of nausea hit. Jack, my husband, sat beside me, oblivious to my discomfort as he chatted with his father about the latest football game. Emily, dear, aren't you going to eat? Linda's shrill voice cut through the din. My mother-in-law's piercing gaze bore into me from across the table. I spent hours preparing this meal. I forced a weak smile. It looks delicious, Linda. I'm just not feeling well. Linda's eyes narrowed. Morning sickness again? Honestly, Emily, you're barely showing. I worked full-time when I was pregnant with Jack, and I never complained once. I bit my tongue, fighting back the urge to remind her that every pregnancy was different. Instead, I reached for my water glass, hoping the cool liquid would settle my stomach. Jack finally seemed to notice my distress. He placed a hand on my arm, but his touch felt more perfunctory than comforting. You okay, hon? Before I could answer, Linda interjected. Oh, she's fine, Jack. Just being dramatic as usual. I clenched my jaw, willing myself not to cry. How had it come to this? When Jack and I first got married, he was my rock, my protector. Now he sat silently as his mother belittled me week after week. So, Emily, Howard, my father-in-law, spoke up, his kind eyes meeting mine. How's work going? Still enjoying that new project? Grateful for the change of subject, I launched into a description of my latest marketing campaign. As I spoke, I felt some of the tension leave my body. At least someone at this table seemed genuinely interested in my life. Halfway through my explanation, Linda interrupted. That's all very nice, dear, but don't you think it's time you started focusing on preparing for the baby? You can't possibly plan to keep working once the little one arrives. I froze, my words dying in my throat. Jack shifted uncomfortably beside me, but remained silent. Actually, I said, finding my voice, I do plan to return to work after my maternity leave. Jack and I discussed it, and we both agree it's the best decision for our family. Linda's face turned an alarming shade of red. Jack, you can't possibly agree with this nonsense. A child needs its mother at home. I turned to my husband, silently pleading for his support. He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. Well, Mom, times have changed. Lots of women work these days. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was something. I squeezed Jack's hand under the table, hoping to convey my gratitude. Linda, however, wasn't finished. I see, so you're planning to let strangers raise your child while you gallivant off to the office? How selfish can you be, Emily? The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the table harder, my knuckles turning white. Excuse me, I mumbled, pushing back my chair. I need some air. As I stood, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Emily? Jack's voice sounded far away. What's wrong? I tried to answer, but another wave of pain hit, stealing my breath. The last thing I heard before the world went black was Linda's exasperated sigh. Oh, for heaven's sake, now she's fainting? Really, Emily, this is getting ridiculous. Then everything faded to darkness, and I crumpled to the floor. I woke up in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling my nostrils. Jack sat in a chair beside me, his head in his hands. When he looked up, I saw the worry etched on his face, a glimpse of the man I fell in love with years ago. Emily, thank God you're awake, he said, reaching for my hand. The doctor said you were severely dehydrated. Why didn't you tell me how bad it was? I almost laughed. I've been trying to tell you for weeks, Jack. You just haven't been listening. His face fell, and for a moment I saw guilt flash in his eyes. But then he straightened, his jaw set. Mom said you were just being dramatic. I didn't think. You didn't think, I cut him off, my voice sharp. That's the problem, Jack. You never think when it comes to your mother. As if summoned by her name, Linda burst into the room, Howard trailing behind her. Oh, Emily, she exclaimed, her voice dripping with false concern. We were so worried. How could you let yourself get into such a state? I closed my eyes, willing myself to stay calm. When I opened them, I locked gazes with Howard, silently pleading for help. He cleared his throat. Linda, maybe we should give Emily some space to rest. Nonsense, Linda snapped. She's had plenty of rest. Now, Emily, dear, when can we expect you back at our weekly dinners? You know how important family time is. I felt something snap inside me. All the frustration, all the hurt of the past few months came bubbling to the surface. Family time? I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. Is that what you call it when you spend every Sunday belittling me and undermining my decisions? The room fell silent. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Now, Emily, Jack started, but I cut him off with a glare. No, Jack. I'm done pretending everything's okay. I turned back to Linda. From the moment Jack and I started dating, you've made it clear you don't think I'm good enough for your precious son. Well, guess what? I'm not going anywhere. This baby is coming, whether you like it or not, and I won't let you poison our child with your toxic behavior. Linda's face turned an alarming shade of red. How dare you speak to me like that? Jack, are you going to let her talk to your mother this way? All eyes turned to Jack. I held my breath, a part of me still hoping he'd stand up for me, like he used to in the early days of our relationship. But Jack just sat there, looking lost. I don't know what to say, he mumbled. In that moment, I saw our entire relationship flash before my eyes. Our first meeting at a speed dating event, where Jack's kind smile had stood out in a sea of forgettable faces. Our whirlwind courtship filled with laughter and dreams of the future. The gradual change after our wedding as Linda's influence grew and Jack became more distant. I think, Howard said quietly, breaking the tense silence, that we should all take a step back and give Emily the rest she needs. Linda opened her mouth to protest, but Howard silenced her with a look I'd never seen him use before. As they left the room, I caught Howard's eye. He gave me a small, sad smile that spoke volumes. Left alone with Jack, I felt a weariness settle over me that had nothing to do with my physical condition. Emily, Jack started, his voice hesitant. I'm sorry. I know things haven't been easy lately. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered when we'd become such strangers. Sorry isn't enough anymore, Jack, I said softly. Something has to change. As the words left my mouth, I felt the baby kick, as if in agreement. I placed a hand on my swollen belly, a fierce protectiveness washing over me. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to protect my child from the toxic environment I'd endured for far too long. The bathroom floor was cold against my cheek as I hugged the toilet bowl, heaving for the third time that morning. 6 months into my pregnancy, and the morning sickness showed no signs of letting up. I heard Jack's footsteps in the hallway and braced myself for another round of his half-hearted concern. "Emily, you okay in there?" His voice was muffled through the door. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. "Just peachy," I croaked. The door creaked open, and Jack poked his head in. "Listen, I know you're not feeling great, but Mom's expecting us for dinner tonight. She's making her famous pot roast." I stared at him in disbelief. "Jack, I can barely keep water down. How am I supposed to sit through another dinner?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Can't you just try? For me?" The plea in his voice made something snap inside me. I struggled to my feet, ignoring the way the room spun. "For you? When was the last time you did something for me, Jack?" His face hardened. "That's not fair. I've been working extra hours to prepare for the baby. And I've been growing a human being while your mother treats me like an incubator." I shot back. Jack's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it. "It's Mom. She wants to know if we're bringing dessert." I threw my hands up in exasperation. "Unbelievable. You know what? Go to your precious dinner. I'll stay here and try not to die of dehydration." His eyes widened. "You can't be serious. Mom will be devastated if you don't show up." "Oh, I'm dead serious," I said, brushing past him into the bedroom. "In fact, I think I'm done with these weekly torture sessions altogether." Jack followed me, his voice rising. "Emily, you can't just decide that on your own. We're a family." I whirled to face him. "Are we? Because lately, it feels like I'm just an afterthought in your perfect mother-son dynamic." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. For a moment I saw a flicker of the old Jack, the one who used to stand up for me, who put our relationship first. But then his jaw set, and I knew what was coming. "Fine," he said coldly. "I'll tell Mom you're not feeling well. Again." As he stormed out, I sank onto the bed, one hand resting on my swollen belly. "Don't worry, little one," I whispered. "Mommy's going to figure this out." Hours later, I was jolted awake by the sound of the front door slamming. Jack's heavy footsteps approached the bedroom, and I steeled myself for another argument. But when he entered, the anger on his face was mixed with something else. Worry? "Emily," he said, his voice strained. She thinks maybe you're faking how sick you are, to avoid her." I sat up slowly, my head spinning. "Excuse me?" Jack ran a hand through his hair. "She says her friend's daughter had an easy pregnancy and that you're just being dramatic, and she thinks maybe you're not cut out for motherhood if you can't handle this." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I'd known Linda didn't like me, but this was a new low. "And what do you think, Jack?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore." In that moment, something crystallized inside me. I thought of all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, all the times I'd bitten my tongue to keep the peace. I thought of the baby growing inside me, innocent and unaware of the storm brewing around it. "I think," I said slowly, "that it's time I started putting myself and our child first." Jack's head snapped up. "What does that mean?" I met his gaze steadily. "It means I'm done compromising my health and happiness for people who clearly don't value either. Your mother and you, Jack. You've made your priorities clear. Now it's time I made mine clear, too." As the words left my mouth, I felt a weight from my shoulders. Whatever came next, I knew I was making the right choice, for myself and for my baby. I stood in Linda's kitchen, my hands shaking as I chopped vegetables for yet another family dinner. At 8 months pregnant, my body ached, and waves of nausea still plagued me. But here I was, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law because Jack had begged me to give his mother one more chance. "Emily, dear," Linda's saccharine voice grated on my nerves. "Don't forget to dice those carrots finely. You know how Jack likes them." I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to throw the knife across the room. "Of course, Linda," I managed to say. Jack and Howard's voices drifted in from the living room, discussing some football game. I longed to be anywhere but here, trapped in this suffocating house with people who seemed oblivious to my discomfort. Suddenly, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, dropping the knife with a clatter. Linda whirled around, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Emily, Don't be so dramatic. It's just a little kitchen work. I clutched the counter, trying to steady myself. Linda, I think something's wrong. She rolled her eyes. Nonsense, you're barely 8 months along. Stop trying to get out of cooking dinner. Another wave of pain hit, more intense than the first. I felt a warm gush between my legs and looked down in horror to see a puddle forming at my feet. My water broke, I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Linda's face contorted with disbelief and annoyance. Impossible. You're faking this, aren't you, just to avoid your responsibilities? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, faced with irrefutable evidence, she was accusing me of lying. Jack! I called out, my voice strained. Jack, please! He appeared in the doorway, looking confused. What's going on? Your wife is putting on quite a performance, Linda said, her voice dripping with disdain. Anything to get out of family dinner, it seems. I stared at Jack, silently pleading with him to see the truth. But his eyes darted between me and his mother, uncertainty written all over his face. Jack, I gasped, another contraction hitting. The baby's coming. We need to go to the hospital. Now. He hesitated, and in that moment I saw our entire future crumble. How could he doubt me at a time like this? Son? Howard's voice cut through the tension as he entered the kitchen. Your wife needs you. Let's get her to the hospital. Thank God for Howard. He was already grabbing my hospital bag and car keys while Jack still stood frozen. This is ridiculous, Linda huffed. She's clearly faking. Jack, don't let her manipulate you like this. I watched as Jack's face hardened and he turned to his mother. Mom, I'm sure Emily wouldn't, but I didn't hear the rest. A contraction so powerful it brought me to my knees, cut off all other sensations. Through the haze of pain, I heard Howard's urgent voice calling 911. As I knelt on Linda's pristine kitchen floor, amniotic fluid pooling around me, I made a decision. No matter what happened next, I would never again put myself in a position where my well-being, and now my child's, came second to anyone else's comfort or convenience. Emily, Howard's gentle voice broke through my thoughts. The ambulance is on its way. Just breathe, okay? I nodded, grateful for his calm presence. Jack knelt beside me, finally snapping out of his daze. Em, I'm so sorry. I should have. Not now, Jack. I cut him off, another contraction building. We'll talk about this later. As the sound of sirens approached, I locked eyes with Linda, who still stood watching with a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. In that moment, I silently vowed that this would be the last time I ever set foot in her house. The paramedics burst in, and as they lifted me onto the stretcher, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. My baby and I deserved better than this. And I was finally ready to fight for it. The hospital room was a blur of beeping machines and urgent voices. I gripped the sides of the bed, pain tearing through me as another contraction hit. Howard stood by my side, his steady presence a stark contrast to Jack's nervous pacing. "Where's the doctor?" Jack demanded, his voice tinged with panic. "She's not supposed to be this early." I wanted to scream at him to remind him that I'd been telling him for weeks something wasn't right, but another wave of pain stole my breath, leaving me gasping. "Jack," Howard said firmly, "why don't you go check on the doctor? I'll stay with Emily." As Jack rushed out, Howard took my hand. "You're doing great, Emily. Just breathe." I nodded gratefully, squeezing his hand as another contraction built. "Howard," I managed between breaths, "thank you for believing me, for helping." His eyes softened with a mix of kindness and regret. "I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. I should have seen how Linda and Jack were treating you." Before I could respond, the door burst open. Linda swept in, her face a mask of indignation. "Emily, how could you do this to us? You've ruined our family dinner." I stared at her in disbelief. Even now, with me in labor, all she cared about was her precious dinner? Howard's face hardened. "Linda, that's enough. Emily needs calm and support right now." Linda opened her mouth to argue, but just then, Jack returned with the doctor. The next few hours passed in a haze of pain, fear, and determination. Through it all, I was acutely aware of Jack's hesitation, how he looked to his mother for guidance instead of focusing on me. Finally, with one last push, our daughter entered the world. The sound of her first cry filled the room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The doctor placed her on my chest, and I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. "Hello, Lily," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I'm your mom. As the nurses took Lily to clean her up, I became aware of the tension in the room. Linda stood in the corner, her lips pursed in disapproval. Jack hovered uncertainly between us, looking lost. Well, Linda said, breaking the silence, I suppose we should be grateful she's healthy, even if she is premature. Really, Emily, couldn't you have held on for a few more weeks? I felt something snap inside me. All the hurt, frustration, and anger I'd been holding back for months came rushing to the surface. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Linda blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? I said, get out, I repeated, louder this time. I want you out of this room, out of my life, and out of my daughter's life. Jack stepped forward, his face pale. Emily, you don't mean that. She's Lily's grandmother. I turned to him, seeing him clearly for the first time in months. And what kind of father are you going to be, Jack? Will you stand by and let her treat our daughter the way she's treated me? He flinched, guilt flashing across his face. But before he could respond, Howard spoke up. I think it's best if we give Emily some space. Linda, Jack, let's go. As they filed out, Howard paused at the door. Emily, if you need anything, anything at all, I'm here. I nodded, grateful for his support. As the door closed behind them, I was left alone with my thoughts and the soft sounds of Lily's breathing from the nearby bassinet. In that quiet moment, holding my newborn daughter and reflecting on the events that led us here, I made a decision. No matter what it took, I would protect Lily from the toxic environment I'd endured, even if it meant walking away from my marriage, from the life I thought I wanted. I looked down at Lily's peaceful face, feeling a surge of strength and determination. It's you and me now, little one, I whispered, and I promise I'll always put you first. The front door creaked open as Jack helped me inside, Lily nestled in my arms. After a week in the hospital, I was exhausted but determined. The house felt different now, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily, dear, Linda's shrill voice pierced the air. She bustled into the hallway, arms outstretched. Let me see my granddaughter. I instinctively tightened my hold on Lily. Not now, Linda. We're tired and need to rest. Linda's face fell, but she quickly plastered on a smile. Of course, of course. I've prepared a wonderful welcome-home dinner. Jack, why don't you take the baby while Emily freshens up? Before I could protest, Jack reached for Lily. Come on, Em. Mom's just trying to help. I felt a surge of panic as Jack took our daughter. Jack, please, I'd rather keep her with me. Linda tutted. Emily, you can't be so possessive. It's not healthy. I bit my tongue, too tired to argue. As I watched Jack carry Lily into the living room, following his mother like an obedient puppy, something inside me hardened. In our bedroom, I found a stack of parenting books on the nightstand, all chosen by Linda, no doubt. Atop the pile sat a handwritten note. Emily, I hope these help you become a better mother. Love, Linda. My hands shook as I crumpled the note. How dare she? After everything that had happened, she still thought she knew best. I heard Lily's cry from downstairs, followed by Linda's voice. Oh, Jack, let me show you how to hold her properly. Emily clearly hasn't figured it out yet. That was the last straw. I marched downstairs, my exhaustion replaced by a fierce determination. In the living room, I found Linda cradling Lily while Jack hovered nervously. Give me my daughter, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Linda looked up, surprise flashing across her face. Emily, don't be silly. I'm just showing Jack. Now. I held out my arms, leaving no room for argument. Jack stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Em, what's gotten into you? Mom's just trying to help. I turned to him, really seeing him for the first time since Lily's birth. Is she, Jack? Or is she trying to control our family, just like she's controlled you all these years? The room fell silent, save for Lily's soft whimpers. Linda's face hardened as she reluctantly handed me the baby. I think, I said, cradling Lily close, that it's time we had a serious talk about boundaries. Jack's eyes widened. Emily, please. Can't we just enjoy being home? I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. No, Jack. We can't keep pretending everything's okay. It's not just about me anymore. It's about Lily. Linda huffed. This is ridiculous. Jack, tell your wife she's being unreasonable. But as Jack opened his mouth to speak, I cut him off. Actually, I have something to say first. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. I can't do this anymore. The constant criticism, the lack of support, the way you both dismiss my feelings and needs. It stops now. Jack paled. What are you saying? I met his gaze steadily. I'm saying that unless things change dramatically, and I mean real, lasting change, I'm leaving, and I'm taking Lily with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's face contorted with rage, while Jack looked like he'd been slapped. You can't do that, Linda sputtered. Jack, tell her she can't do that. But Jack just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as I spoke the words I'd been holding back for so long. I can, and I will. I love you, Jack, but I love our daughter more, and I won't let her grow up in this toxic environment. As I turned to head back upstairs, Lily snuggled against my chest with I heard Linda's indignant squawks and Jack's stammered protests. But for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace with my decision. Whatever came next, I knew I was doing the right thing, for myself and for Lily. The tension in the house was unbearable. It had been 3 days since I'd threatened to leave, and Jack had been walking on eggshells around me. Linda, on the other hand, had doubled down on her efforts to control everything. I was in the nursery, rocking Lily to sleep when I heard raised voices from downstairs. Curious, I gently placed Lily in her crib and crept to the top of the stairs. This is all your fault, Jack. Linda's shrill voice carried up the stairwell. If you just put your foot down with that woman... That woman is my wife, Mom, Jack interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically firm. And Lily's mother. I held my breath, hardly daring to hope that Jack was finally standing up to Linda. Oh, please, Linda scoffed. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? First with this ridiculous pregnancy, and now threatening to take your child away. My blood boiled at her words. How dare she dismiss everything I'd been through? Actually, a new voice joined the fray, Howard's. I think Emily's been more than patient with both of you. I inched down a few steps, straining to hear better. Howard, Linda gasped. How can you say that? We've done nothing but try to help. Help? Howard's voice was thick with disgust. Is that what you call constantly criticizing and belittling our daughter-in-law, dismissing her health concerns, trying to take over raising our granddaughter? There was a moment of stunned silence before Linda sputtered. I was just trying to guide them. They're so young, they don't know what they're doing. They're adults, Linda, Howard said firmly. Capable adults who don't need you micromanaging their lives. I heard footsteps, and then Howard's voice again, closer this time. Jack, son, I owe you an apology. I should have stepped in sooner, should have seen how your mother's behavior was affecting your marriage. Dad, Jack started, but Howard cut him off. No, let me finish. I've stood by for too long watching your mother steamroll over everyone's feelings. Well, not anymore. There was a rustling of paper, and then Linda's shocked gasp. Howard, what is this? Divorce papers, Linda, Howard said calmly. I can't be part of this toxic dynamic anymore, and if you have any hope of salvaging your relationship with your son and granddaughter, I suggest you take a long, hard look at your behavior. My heart raced as I processed what I'd just heard. Howard was leaving Linda, and he was on my side. Suddenly, a piercing wail cut through the tension. Lily had woken up. I rushed back to the nursery, scooping her into my arms just as I heard footsteps on the stairs. Jack appeared in the doorway, his face a mix of emotions. Em, he said softly. Can we talk? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He crossed the room, gently touching Lily's cheek before meeting my eyes. I heard everything, I whispered. Jack's shoulders sagged. I'm so sorry, Emily, for everything. I've been a coward, letting my mother run our lives, but I don't want to lose you or Lily. I wanted to believe him, but after months of disappointment, I hesitated. Jack, But before I could finish, Linda burst into the room, her face red with fury. This is all your fault, she shrieked, pointing at me. You've turned my family against me. Jack stepped between us, shielding Lily and me. That's enough, Mom. You need to leave, now. Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. Jack! You can't mean that. I do, he said firmly. Emily and Lily are my family now, and if you can't respect that, you have no place in our lives. As Linda stormed out, sobbing dramatically, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us after all. But as I looked down at Lily, peaceful in my arms, I knew the hardest decision was still to come. Could I trust Jack to maintain this newfound backbone? Or was it time to make a clean break and start a new life with my daughter? With my heart pounding and Lily's warm weight in my arms, I realized the moment of truth had arrived. Whatever I decided next would shape not just my future but Lily's as well. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but I knew I had to be strong, for both of us. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when everything changed. I sat on a park bench, watching Lily toddle across the grass, her chubby legs still unsteady but her determination unwavering. Just like her mother, I thought with a smile. "She's getting so big," a familiar voice said. I looked up to see Howard approaching, a wistful smile on his face. "She is," I agreed, patting the bench beside me. "How are you doing, Howard?" He sighed as he sat down. "The divorce is final. Linda, well, she's not taking it well, but I don't regret my decision." I nodded, understanding all too well. My own divorce from Jack had been finalized just a month ago. It hadn't been easy, but I knew it was the right choice for Lily and me. "Have you heard from Jack?" Howard asked hesitantly. I shook my head. "Not since the court hearing. I think he's still trying to figure things out." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Jack, asking if he could see Lily this weekend. I showed Howard the message, my heart conflicted. "What are you going to do?" he asked gently. I watched Lily laugh as she chased a butterfly, her joy infectious. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to protect her from everything, but she deserves to know her father." Howard nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Emily, I've been thinking a lot about the mistakes I made, staying silent when I should have spoken up, letting Linda's behavior go unchecked for so long. I don't want to make those same mistakes with Lily." I turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his eyes misty, "that I want to be there for both of you. Not to replace Jack, but to support you however I can, if you'll let me." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out to squeeze his hand. "Howard, you've already done so much. Your support these past months has meant everything." Just then Lily toddled over, holding out a dandelion. "Mama," she exclaimed proudly. I scooped her up, inhaling her sweet baby scent. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful." As Lily snuggled into my lap, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew we'd be okay. "You know," I said to Howard, "I think I will let Jack see Lily this weekend, but on my terms. No Linda, and only for a few hours." Howard nodded approvingly. "That sounds fair, and if you need backup, I'm just a phone call away." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I reflected on how much had changed. The Emily of a year ago would never have believed she'd be here, a single mother, divorced, but stronger and happier than ever. "Come on, little one," I said, standing up with Lily in my arms. "Let's go home." Howard walked us to my car, helping me buckle Lily into her seat. Before I got in, he pulled me into a warm hug. "I'm proud of you, Emily," he said softly. "You're an amazing mother, and Lily is lucky to have you." As I drove home, Lily babbling happily in the back seat, I felt a surge of gratitude. For my parents, who had welcomed us with open arms. For Howard, who had become the father figure I never knew I needed. And even for Jack and Linda, whose actions had ultimately led me to find my own strength. But most of all, I was grateful for Lily, my beautiful, resilient daughter who had given me the courage to stand up for myself and create the life we deserved. As we pulled into our driveway, our new home, free from the shadows of the past, I made a silent promise to Lily and myself. We would face whatever challenges came our way together, with love, strength, and the unwavering belief that we deserved happiness. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what it held. As I unbuckled Lily from her car seat, her tiny arms wrapping around my neck, I knew that this moment, this love was all that truly mattered. We were survivors, Lily and I, and together we would thrive.
"Why are you even in this house? You're like a parasite living off of us." Here, as soon as the words left my mouth, my mother-in-law wasted no time throwing my belongings out of the window. I protested her irrational actions, asking, "What did you say? Don't you dare talk back to me. Can you pick my stuff up, please?" I pleaded. In response, my mother-in-law put a knife to my throat, paralyzing me with fear. "Get out, or this won't just be a game anymore." "I understand. If that's the case, I'll leave immediately," I replied. She gave me a week to vacate the premises, and I showed respect, though I couldn't suppress a hidden amusement beneath my straight face. Little did she know that I was the one supporting this house. Despite the torment I endured living with my mother-in-law, the fear from earlier vanished. I thought, if you've got what it takes, then prove it. I'll give you a week. I expect you to be out of here by then, she declared. Thank you, I said, showing respect, though laughter lingered just beneath the surface, hoping she didn't notice. I believed my departure would bring peace to our home. Little did she know, leaving her in the family home, I moved to a high-rise apartment. Eventually, she would learn the truth, but by then, it would be too late. I am Valerie Reynolds, applying my past work experience while working from home. It had been 5 years since I married Justin, expecting a peaceful and happy life. However, life took an unexpected turn when Justin had a construction site accident, resulting in the loss of most of the use of his dominant arm. Grateful that he survived, I found myself in the hospital room, tears streaming down my face. My mother-in-law arrived, seemingly oblivious to my presence, rushing to Justin's side. She suggested he stay with her, and I was taken aback by the proposal. When she noticed my surprise, she coldly questioned, "What's wrong? Do you have a problem with that?" "No, it's not that. It's just a bit sudden with my son like this. I can't leave everything up to you," I retorted, irritated by her words. Justin, however, expressed his trust in me, saying, "Valerie has been working hard all this time. That's why I trust her." Going forward, my mother-in-law, displeased, made an inaudible noise, but she couldn't sway my determination. "Well, anyway, come to the house as soon as you're discharged from the hospital." "Of course, you're invited, Valerie." "That goes without saying," she said. I could predict what would happen if everything were left up to my mother-in-law. "By the way, Valerie, I'm leaving all the moving arrangements to you," my husband chimed in. "It's too much for one person to handle alone. Mom, please help her out." I hoped he would insist more strongly, but it seemed my mother-in-law had no intention of helping and ignored my husband's words. "I have my own things to do, you know." She smirked at me, unnoticed by my husband. It felt ominous, and so began our life living with my mother-in-law. A month later, my husband was discharged from the hospital, and I was busy with the move, leaving the task of picking him up to my mother-in-law. She came to me and said, "Aren't you done yet? I told you today was Justin's discharge day, and yet you didn't even come to pick him up. But that's because—" "You see, Justin," I started, but my husband interrupted. "Just like I said, right? This person only thinks about herself." My mother-in-law's intention was clear. She was trying to make me look bad in front of my husband. I decided not to take her obvious bait. Looking at my husband, he had a warm and understanding look in his eyes. "Come on, Mom, stop this. It's unsightly. I'm doing this for your sake." "Well, no one asked you to wait." The sight of my mother-in-law running after my husband was comically pathetic. When she noticed, she glared at me with an evil expression. "Not that her glare meant anything to me, Justin. You can just take it easy and relax at home from now on," I suggested. "That's impossible. My right hand might not work, but I don't want to be a burden on Valerie," he replied. "I can understand that, but you've just been discharged from the hospital." "Still, I can be satisfied if I don't do something." Justin was adamant. And initially, I had hoped he would take some time to relax, but seeing his determination, I decided to respect his wishes. Doing everything at once might be too much. So how about starting with some light cleaning? "It could be good for rehabilitation," I suggested. "That's a good idea. I don't know if this hand will ever fully recover, but it's better than doing nothing. But on one condition, don't overdo it, got it?" I wouldn't want to be scolded. It's scary to make you angry. Justin acted as if nothing was wrong, making it clear that he didn't want to make me worry. So I resolved to work even harder for the both of us. However, I had forgotten about one person who would interfere, Valerie. "Wait a minute. What's the matter? Why is Justin cleaning? You must have forced him to do it, right? Your words are just a friend," my mother-in-law accused. She judged things only by what she saw. oblivious to the underlying thoughts and emotions. Dealing with that was a challenge in itself. You're always just cooped up in your room, playing around. Honestly, in such a situation with your husband seriously injured. Actually, I'm working. It's called remote work these days, I defended. I've had enough of that excuse, my mother-in-law replied. It's not an excuse, I said. Just then, my mother-in-law grabbed a nearby trash can and threw it at me. Luckily, it didn't hit me directly, but the trash went everywhere. I lost the energy to explain things to her further. It was clear from the start that she had no intention of listening. This trash is disgusting. Clean it up yourself, she said, as I sighed and started picking it up. Justin approached me and asked, "Hey, what happened?" "Oh, this is just a small incident," I replied with a forced smile. But Justin seemed to have realized something. He usually appears calm, but sometimes he's surprisingly perceptive. Did Mom do something? Are you hiding something? Can you be honest with me? Justin was looking at me with a serious expression. Seeing his face, I felt that I couldn't lie, so I told him what had happened. Got it. I'll talk to Mom about this. Oh, it's fine, you really. But it's not okay. I'll talk to her properly. No, but that is. I was happy to get his help, but I was worried about what would come next. In the end, I would be the one blamed. I stared at the ceiling, deep in thought. Night came, and I thought Valerie was just playing around. That's not true. Valerie has been working hard, even my share. Then why were you cleaning? I offered to do it. I can't just sit around doing nothing at home. But you just got out of the hospital. I know my own body best. Justin's stern words silenced his mother. She might not have expected her son to speak to her like that. But if she really does think that she's above such things, she's just arrogant. I hoped that this would calm her down a bit. That day, Justin went out for rehabilitation, leaving me alone with my mother-in-law. As I was working in my room as usual, she showed up. Can we talk? Sorry, can you wait just a bit? About 15 more minutes? No, I can't wait right now. All right, I'm coming. I hurried along and went to the living room where an unknown woman was waiting for us. Excuse me, who is this? Have a seat first, we'll talk. After that, I had no choice but to follow my mother-in-law, but I couldn't grasp the situation. As I was trying to figure it out, the woman started speaking. So this is the one you were talking about, the wife who just plays around without working. Yes, it's true. My mother-in-law was laughing eerily. So you realize that you're an unnecessary presence in this house. What are you talking about? Looking around, I saw them sighing. I didn't understand. Suddenly confronted by a stranger and put down as the target of blame. If I could, I would have left that place in an instant. Don't you understand? Unnecessary people are not needed here. What do you mean? More perplexing questions followed. They kept insisting on how incompetent I was. Enduring such accusations could mentally exhaust anyone. Isn't it time you realize your place? Shouldn't I be asking you? How dare a daughter-in-law toy her mother-in-law? Spending time on such unproductive things, isn't it a waste of time? What nerve of a daughter-in-law, really now? I felt like I was reaching my limit. I didn't know what my mother-in-law would do if she got angrier. That's when I came up with an idea. Oh, isn't it about time that Justin comes back from rehab? Is it that time already? Just then, the unknown woman left quickly. I'll come again soon. Okay, I'll be waiting for you. Let's talk again. My mother-in-law and her friend were fooled. In reality, Justin wouldn't be home for another hour. It was just getting good. Speaking of which, who was that woman? I finally asked a question that had been on my mind. That's Susan, a close friend of mine. She wanted to meet you after hearing about you. It wasn't hard to guess how my mother-in-law had introduced me, probably as a useless wife who does nothing but play around. I sighed when mother-in-law for doing nothing else but that. So that's the case? Well, Justin will be back a bit later. I'm going back to work now, I said. As I was about to return to my room, she said, Wait, what do you mean? Just as I said, he's not coming back yet. You lied. You didn't realize. Why do you act like this? I decided to use this opportunity to speak my mind. Any further interference from my mother-in-law would just be a nuisance. Actually, you were the one who started things, right? You called your friend because you can't do anything alone. That's not true. I can handle you fine by myself. Then why don't you try to see if you really can? I deliberately provoked my mother-in-law, thinking this would prompt her to take some action. And as expected, she reacted. If you want to apologize, now is the time. I have no such intention, I said. At that, my mother-in-law exploded in anger, grabbing a nearby vase and throwing it at me, similar to how she had previously thrown the trash can. I had anticipated it and easily dodged, even showing a provocative smile. Just then, Justin came home. My mother-in-law was visibly shaken. Why aren't you home already? It's not time yet. Oh, sorry, I lied earlier. I was actually on my way back. Why would you do that? Justin asked. Isn't it obvious? I said, pointing to the shattered vase. I couldn't help but find the situation amusing. Hey, what's this? What happened? Justin asked. Your mom threw it at me. What? You mean? A lady just came over, claiming to be your mom's friend. I told Justin everything that happened. He showed a mix of surprise and anger. Is that true, Mom? Well, so it's true then. Why would you do that? I didn't mean to, my mother-in-law muttered. Watching my mother-in-law being scolded, I felt a sense of retribution for all the hardships I had endured. Well, I have something to do, so okay, Justin said. Ignoring my mother-in-law's words, I returned to my room, thinking this would end her bullying. I truly believed it. After that, calm days continued for a while. But having stayed up all night, I had dozed off past noon. Sorry to wake you, but can you come here for a moment? Justin asked. Okay, sure, I replied. Justin seemed unusually serious. My mother-in-law was there in the living room. What's going on? Look at this, Justin said. I looked at the table to find a disassembled plastic model scattered about. It was one of Justin's hobbies, and he had treasured it. When I came home, it was like this. Do you know anything? No, I have no clue, I replied. I couldn't think of any reason for it. This plastic model was in my father-in-law's room before, but of course, I hadn't been in that room today, nor had I entered it recently. Someone must have broken it for it to be like this, Justin said. My eyes naturally turned towards my mother-in-law. She was the only suspect. My mother-in-law had a strange, eerie smile on her face, like she was possessed. I understood the situation. Even if someone broke it, I was out. I met Justin on my way back from Susan's place, remember? Yes, but... And then I found this in the room, my mother-in-law said, holding a shiny object. Is that an earring? I instinctively checked my own ears. My left earring was missing. I was certain of my suspicions. It was clear revenge on me for last time. This is yours, isn't it, Mallory? And it looks like only the left one is missing, Justin said. I took a deep breath. Showing anger now would mean that I would be playing into her hands. Indeed, it's mine. But isn't it premature to conclude that I broke it? Making excuses is so unbecoming. We have evidence. Anyway, it's broken. Wait a minute, Justin said, leaving the room. At that moment, my mother-in-law's gaze was fixed on me. The situation made me feel like Justin saw me as a criminal, and I just stood there stunned. It's a shame. This would have been the end of you if you did it. You set a trap, didn't you? You'll find no evidence anywhere. If only you had followed my advice, this wouldn't have happened, my mother-in-law said. If I explain things to him properly, he'll understand, won't he? I asked. Her words became reality. No matter how much I insisted to Justin that it wasn't my fault, he wouldn't take me seriously. I haven't done anything wrong, maybe. I get it, Justin interrupted, immediately averting his gaze. Laughter echoed from behind us. See, I told you so. What does that matter? It's sad that you don't want to admit defeat. After that, I immersed myself in work. It was almost like escaping from reality. Conversations with Justin became less frequent, and about 2 weeks went by during this time. My mother-in-law seemed quite pleased with herself. "You seem down lately. Is there something troubling you?" "There's no need for you to worry. Please stop. It's too late for that. Acting tough is useless on this day." My mother-in-law was in an especially good mood. My feeling of foreboding came true, eventually becoming reality. It happened while I was cleaning the room. "Why are you even in this house? You're like a parasite living off of us here. What's gotten into you all of a sudden?" "You always talk back. Such a noisy daughter-in-law," she said. After saying that, she threw my belongings out of the window. "What are you doing?" I protested her insane actions, questioning what had gotten into her. "You're too noisy, always talking back. Can you pick my stuff up, please?" I said, hoping for some reason to prevail. But as I said that, my mother-in-law put a knife to my throat. I was frozen in fear, unable to move. "It's better if you stay still. A normal person wouldn't do this," I managed to utter. My mother-in-law was clearly deranged. "If you don't leave now, next time it won't be just a joke," she threatened. "I understand. I'll leave," I said, realizing that staying would only drag me further into her madness. "You have a week. Leave before then." "Thank you," she said. It was evident that staying would only worsen things in her madness. My mother-in-law didn't understand who truly supported this house. She lived comfortably and leisurely thanks to me, yet she really knew nothing. "Pack up quickly," she ordered, and I obliged. A smile formed on my lips as I bowed my head, but I couldn't let her suspect anything. I quickly composed my face. "This will bring peace back to our home." "I'm so happy," she remarked. But her happiness was short-lived. I couldn't help but think about the true hell awaiting her. After my mother-in-law had gone to bed, I explained the situation to Justin. "I see, so it has come to this. Actually, I have something to tell you too," he said with a serious tone, surprising me. "What?" I asked. "Various things. We'll talk about it later," he replied, his serious tone making me raise my voice in surprise. But he assured me we'd discuss it later. 3 days after being told to leave the house by my mother-in-law, I found a new place. Now the promised week was almost up. "Well, today's the day of the promise. You understand, right?" I asked Justin. "Yes, the movers are scheduled to arrive soon," he replied. But when I inquired about Justin's whereabouts, he seemed to have gone out since the morning. "Well, never mind. The thought of not having to see your face anymore is enough. I'm going out now. Make sure everything's clean, understood?" I told my mother-in-law, smiling though not genuinely. An hour later, the moving company arrived and loaded all my belongings. I contacted Justin. "All packed up, got it? Just make sure you get there safely, okay? See you later," he said, ending the call. I was excited to think about what would happen when my mother-in-law returned. Finally, the moment of completing the move arrived. "What have you done?" "Justin's belongings are nowhere to be found," my mother-in-law exclaimed. "Of course, we moved out together." "No way. Do you want to check with him?" I got out my phone, sent it to speaker, and handed it to my mother-in-law, who still couldn't grasp the situation. Justin confirmed the plan, leaving my mother-in-law bewildered. "This was my plan all along, Mom," I admitted. "What's happening? Tell me," she pleaded. "Actually, about the model kit incident, we know that you did it," Justin declared, putting an end to her denials. "There's no way Valerie would do such a thing," he added, defending me. "Why do you think that?" "Because it was a gift from Valerie. She wouldn't break it on purpose," Justin reasoned. My mother-in-law was at a loss for words, realizing that she had been supported by the very person she had mistreated.
"Well then, you'll have to manage on your own from here on out," Justin concluded. "But I don't work if you two leave me," she said, coming to terms with the consequences of her actions. "Mom, it's no longer our business." "Well, it's time for each of us to do our best," Justin remarked, ending the conversation. We felt relieved. We had hoped for a good relationship at first, but quickly gave up. Now my mother-in-law chose her own fate. "But why did you keep it a secret about that?" What about Mom? I asked in disbelief. We looked at each other and burst out laughing. Finally, we could have a peaceful life together. About a month later, Justin expressed some doubts. You seem down lately. Is there something troubling you? There's no need for you to worry. Please stop. It's too late for that. Acting tough is useless, I assure him. On this day, my mother-in-law was in an especially good mood. My feeling of foreboding came true, eventually becoming reality.
Lydia, how could Stephen do this to us? He's gambled away our savings. Esther's voice cracked with shock as she waved the bank statement in front of my face. I stared at the numbers, unable to comprehend the depth of my husband's betrayal. Our hard-earned retirement fund, the nest egg we'd carefully built over decades of sacrifice, had vanished into the abyss of his addiction. Esther's accusatory glare bore into me, as if I were somehow responsible for her son's reckless behavior. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. I had no idea, I stammered, my hands trembling. He never told me anything. Esther scoffed, her lips curling into a sneer. Of course he didn't. You're too busy with your little hobbies to notice what's happening in your own home. Her words stung, but I knew better than to engage in her toxic games. Stephen had always been her golden child, capable of no wrong in her eyes. As if on cue, my husband shuffled into the kitchen, his eyes downcast and his shoulders slumped. He reeked of stale cigarettes and cheap whiskey, a far cry from the sharp-dressed professional he once was. Mom, Lydia? I'm sorry, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. I got in too deep and I couldn't stop. Esther rounded on him, her fury palpable. You foolish boy, how could you do this to your family? Your wife and children deserve better than a deadbeat gambler. Stephen flinched, shrinking under his mother's wrath. I wanted to defend him, to remind Esther that he was a grown man, not the little boy she still saw him as, but the words died on my lips, choked by the weight of his betrayal. In that moment, I realized the true gravity of our situation. With our savings gone, we would be forced to rely on Esther's meager pension and my modest retirement income. The comfortable life we had built for ourselves was crumbling before our eyes. Esther turned to me, her eyes narrowed. You'll have to take me in, Lydia. I can't afford to live on my own anymore. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words never came. What choice did I have? Stephen had squandered our financial security, and his mother was now our responsibility. As I nodded my reluctant agreement, I couldn't help but feel the invisible chains of obligation tightening around me. Our once peaceful suburban home was about to become a battleground, and I feared I was ill-equipped for the war that lay ahead. Lydia, this food is awful. You never had any sense of taste, Esther complained, pushing the plate away with a look of disgust. I bit my tongue, fighting back the urge to defend my cooking. It was a losing battle, one I'd learned long ago not to engage in. Esther had always been critical, her sharp tongue a weapon she wielded with precision. Stephen, as usual, remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate as he mechanically shoveled food into his mouth. He had long since given up trying to mediate the constant tension between his mother and me. Adam and Leah exchanged uncomfortable glances, caught in the crossfire of our dysfunctional family dynamic. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing that their childhood memories were tainted by scenes like this, played out over and over again. Grandma, the food is delicious, Leah offered, her voice gentle but strained. Mom worked hard on this meal, Esther scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. You're too kind, dear. Your mother has never been much of a cook. Adam shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed. Mom, maybe you should listen to Grandma's advice. She knows what she's talking about. I felt the familiar sting of his words, a reminder that even my own son had been swayed by Esther's manipulative ways. She had a knack for turning family members against one another, sowing seeds of doubt and discontent. As the meal dragged on, the tension in the air grew thicker, suffocating me with each passing minute. I longed for the days when our family gatherings had been filled with laughter and warmth, before Esther's presence had cast a dark shadow over our home. After what felt like an eternity, the dishes were cleared, and Esther retreated to her room, leaving a trail of criticism in her wake. Stephen, as always, followed dutifully, his loyalty to his mother unwavering. I sank onto the couch, exhausted by the constant battle to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Adam and Leah hovered nearby, their expressions a mix of pity and frustration. "Mom, you shouldn't let her get to you like that," Leah said softly, taking a seat beside me. "Grandma is just, well, you know how she is." I forced a smile, but it felt hollow. "I know, dear. It's just, sometimes it feels like she's slowly chipping away at me, piece by piece." Adam shook his head, his jaw set in a familiar stubborn line. "You're too sensitive, Mom. Grandma's just trying to help in her own way." I wanted to argue, to make him see the truth about Esther's manipulative behavior, but I knew it would be futile. He was too deeply entrenched in her web of lies and deceit. As I watched my children leave, each carrying their own burdens of family drama, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hopelessness. Esther's grip on our lives seemed unbreakable, and I feared that the fractures within our family would only continue to widen. "Mom, you've always been so stubborn. You should listen to Grandma," Adam lectured me coldly, his arms folded across his chest. I felt a familiar pang in my heart as my own son sided with Esther, his grandmother's poisonous words seeping into his mind like a slow-acting venom. It was a scene that had played out countless times, but the sting never dulled. Beside him, Rebecca nodded in agreement, her lips curved into a smug smile. She had quickly become Esther's ally, feeding into the toxic dynamic that had taken root in our home. "Adam, please," I pleaded, my voice strained. "Can't you see what she's doing? She's trying to turn us against each other." He scoffed, shaking his head dismissively. "You're just being paranoid, Mom. Grandma only wants what's best for us." I wanted to scream, to shake him until he saw the truth, but I knew it would be futile. Esther had sunk her claws into him long ago, and her grip was unrelenting. Stephen, as always, remained silent, his eyes downcast as he retreated to the shadows of our crumbling marriage. He had long since abdicated his role as a husband and father, content to let Esther dictate the course of our lives. Leah, my sweet, sensitive daughter, watched the exchange with a pained expression. She had always been caught in the crossfire, torn between her loyalty to her family and her desire for peace. "Mom, Dad, please," she implored, her voice trembling. "Can't we just get along? Tom and I are getting married soon, and I don't want this drama to overshadow our special day." I felt a surge of guilt, knowing that my daughter's happiness was being tainted by the toxic environment we had created. She deserved better, a loving family to support her as she embarked on this new chapter of her life. But Esther was having none of it. "Don't be ridiculous, Leah," she snapped. "Your mother is the one causing all the problems. If she would just listen to me, everything would be fine." I clenched my fists, biting back the retort that burned on my tongue. Esther thrived on conflict, reveling in the chaos she sowed within our family. As the argument escalated, I felt myself retreating inward, a protective shell forming around my battered heart. I had always prided myself on being a strong, capable woman, but Esther's relentless attacks had slowly chipped away at my confidence, leaving me doubting my worth as a wife and mother. In that moment, a seed of defiance took root within me. I couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a cycle of toxicity and abuse. Something had to change, and I knew it would have to start with me. As my family dispersed, each retreating to their respective corners, I made a silent vow. I would find a way to regain control of my life, to break free from Esther's suffocating grip. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to succeed, no matter the cost. "Lydia, why are you working? Are you up to something no good?" Rebecca asked, her voice dripping with false concern as she leaned against the kitchen counter. I fought back the urge to roll my eyes, knowing that any reaction would only fuel her twisted games. Esther's influence had seeped into her like a poisonous venom, turning my once pleasant daughter-in-law into a master of subtle manipulation. "I'm just trying to keep busy," I replied, forcing a tight smile. "It gets a little lonely around here during the day." Rebecca's lips curved into a sickly sweet smile, her eyes glinting with malice. "Well, we wouldn't want you getting into any trouble, would we? A woman your age, working with all those young people, who knows what kind of ideas they might put in your head?" The implication hung heavy in the air, a thinly veiled accusation of infidelity. I felt my cheeks flush with anger, but I refused to take the bait. Esther and Rebecca thrived on conflict, and I was determined not to give them the satisfaction. "I appreciate your concern, Rebecca," I said evenly, but I can assure you my intentions are pure. I'm simply trying to make the most of my retirement years." Her smile faltered for a moment, and I saw a flicker of frustration cross her features. She had expected me to lash out, to play into her twisted narrative, but I had learned to control my emotions, to deny her the drama she so desperately craved. As if on cue, Esther shuffled into the kitchen, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's going on in here?" she demanded, her gaze darting between us. Rebecca quickly recovered, her mask of concern slipping back into place. "I was just asking Lydia about her new job," she said innocently. "I'm a little worried about her, that's all." Esther's lips curled into a sneer as she turned her attention to me. "A job? At your age? What could you possibly need to work for?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the onslaught. "It's just a part-time position at the community center," I explained calmly. "It gives me something to do during the day, and a little extra income never hurts." Esther scoffed, her eyes boring into me with contempt. "Extra income? Don't be ridiculous. We both know Stephen's gambling has left us in a precarious financial situation. You're up to something, Lydia, and I intend to find out what it is." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips. What was the point? Esther had already made up her mind, and no amount of reasoning would sway her. She was determined to paint me as the villain, the one responsible for the fractures that had torn our family apart. As Esther and Rebecca continued to whisper and speculate, their voices a constant buzz in my ear, I felt a familiar sense of isolation creep over me. Stephen, as always, was nowhere to be found, content to let his mother and wife wage their war of words without him. In that moment, I realized that the only person I could truly rely on was myself. If I wanted to preserve what little dignity I had left, I would have to find a way to rise above the toxicity that had engulfed our home. Leah's voice broke through my thoughts, a welcome reprieve from the chaos. "Mom, can we talk for a minute?" I nodded gratefully, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the kitchen. As we retreated to the privacy of the living room, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, in my daughter's understanding and support, I would find the strength to weather this storm. "I need to tell you something, Mom. Dad's been seeing another woman," Leah blurted out, her eyes brimming with tears. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stared at my daughter, unable to process what she had just revealed. Stephen, my husband of nearly 4 decades, had been unfaithful. "Are you sure?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Leah nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Tom's friend saw them together at a restaurant last week. They were holding hands and acting like a couple." A wave of nausea washed over me as the reality of Stephen's betrayal sank in. All those nights he had claimed to be working late, all the excuses and lies, they had been a smokescreen to cover up his affair. Anger bubbled up inside me, a white-hot fury that threatened to consume me. How could he do this to our family? To me? After everything we had been through, after all the sacrifices I had made to keep our household afloat in the wake of his gambling addiction, this was how he repaid me. "That bastard," I hissed, clenching my fists. "I'll kill him." Leah's eyes widened, and she reached out to grasp my hand. "Mom, please, don't do anything rash. We need to handle this carefully." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my emotions. Leah was right, as much as it pained me to admit it. Confronting Stephen in a blind rage would only give him the upper hand, allowing him to play the victim as he so often did. "You're right," I conceded, my voice steadier now. "We need to be smart about this." Leah nodded, her expression grim. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I know how much this must hurt." I forced a weak smile, touched by her concern. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. Your father made his choices, and now he'll have to face the consequences." As Leah left to rejoin her fiancé, I felt a newfound sense of determination coursing through my veins. Stephen had crossed a line, and this time there would be no forgiveness, no second chances. He had shattered the fragile trust that had held our family together, and for that he would pay dearly. I paced the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. I could confront him, demand a divorce, and take him for every penny he had left. Or perhaps a more subtle approach was called for, a slow and methodical dismantling of his life until he was left with nothing but the ashes of his own making. As I mulled over my options, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. Lydia, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. I turned to find Esther regarding me with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Of course, she would be the last to know about Stephen's indiscretions. Her precious son could do no wrong in her eyes. A wicked smile curved my lips as a plan began to take shape. If Esther wanted to remain blissfully ignorant of her son's failings, so be it. But she would soon learn that her blind loyalty had consequences, and I would be the one to deliver that harsh lesson. "Nothing's wrong, Esther," I replied smoothly. "In fact, everything is about to change for the better." "I'm leaving you, Stephen. I refuse to live in this misery any longer," I declared, thrusting a packed suitcase into his hands. Stephen blinked at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about, Lydia? Where are you going?" "Away from you," I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Away from this toxic household and your constant betrayal." Realization dawned on his face, and he had the decency to look ashamed, if only for a moment. "Leah told you about the affair, didn't she?" I nodded, my jaw clenched. "How could you, Stephen? After everything we've been through, how could you do this to our family?" He shrugged, his eyes cold and devoid of remorse. "It just happened, Lydia. You know how things have been between us lately. I needed someone to make me feel alive again." I recoiled as if he had struck me, his callous words cutting deeper than any physical blow. In that moment, I saw him for what he truly was, a selfish, weak man who had sacrificed his integrity and our marriage on the altar of his own desires. "You disgust me," I hissed, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "Get out of my sight before I do something I'll regret." Stephen opened his mouth as if to protest, but the sound of footsteps in the hallway cut him off. Esther appeared, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her gaze flickering between us. "Lydia, why are you packing Stephen's things?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. "I'm leaving, Esther. Your precious son has been having an affair, and I won't stand for it any longer." Esther's eyes widened, and she turned to Stephen, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Is this true? Have you been unfaithful to your wife?" Stephen shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his mother's piercing gaze. "It's complicated, Mom. Things haven't been right between us for a long time." "That's no excuse," Esther thundered, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you bring such shame upon this family?" I watched the exchange with a sense of grim satisfaction, reveling in the sight of Esther's world crumbling around her. For once, her beloved son was the target of her wrath, and I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of vindication. As Esther continued to berate Stephen, her words laced with venom, I slipped out of the room, leaving them to their bitter recriminations. It was time for me to start anew, to forge a life free from the toxicity that had plagued me for far too long. With a newfound sense of purpose, I gathered what few belongings I needed and made my way to the front door. As I stepped outside, the warm evening air caressed my face, and I inhaled deeply, savoring the taste of freedom. In that moment, I knew that the road ahead would be far from easy. Esther and Stephen would undoubtedly try to claw their way back into my life, using every manipulation tactic at their disposal. But I was ready for them, my resolve hardened by years of enduring their cruelty. As I walked away from the house that had once been my home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The invisible chains that had bound me for so long had finally been broken, and I was free to chart my own course, unencumbered by the burdens of the past. "Mom, Grandma can't handle it. She's asking for you," Adam's voice pleaded weakly over the phone. I couldn't help but smile at the irony of the situation. Esther, the woman who had made my life a living hell for so long, was now desperate for my help. The tables had truly turned. "Is she now?" I replied, keeping my tone even. "And why should I come back to that toxic environment?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture Adam squirming uncomfortably. "Look, Mom, I know things have been rough, but Grandma is really struggling without you. She can't keep up with the household chores, and Dad is useless." I felt a twinge of satisfaction at the thought of Esther's carefully constructed world crumbling around her. For years, she had lorded over our family, wielding her power like a weapon. Now, she was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. "I'm sorry, Adam, but I can't just come running back at her beck and call." I said firmly. Your grandmother has made my life miserable for far too long. If she wants my help, she'll have to agree to my terms. Another pause, this one longer. I could sense Adam's hesitation, his loyalty to Esther, warring with his desperation for a solution. What kind of terms? He finally asked, his voice tinged with resignation. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. First and foremost, Esther needs to acknowledge her behavior and apologize for the way she's treated me all these years. No more manipulation, no more cruelty. Adam scoffed, and I could picture the skeptical look on his face. You know Grandma, Mom. She'll never admit she was wrong. Then I guess she'll have to learn to fend for herself, I replied, my tone brooking no argument. I'm done being her punching bag. There was a long silence, and for a moment I thought Adam had hung up. But then, his voice crackled through the line once more. Okay, Mom, I'll talk to her and see what I can do, but I can't make any promises. That's all I ask, I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. The first step had been taken, the gauntlet thrown down. Now it was up to Esther to decide how far she was willing to go to regain my cooperation. As I ended the call, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in my newfound strength. For too long, I had allowed Esther to dictate the terms of my life, to strip me of my dignity and self-worth. But no more. This was my chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine. And I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. Over the next few days, I waited patiently for Adam's response, steeling myself for the inevitable backlash from Esther. She was a proud woman, and admitting her wrongdoing would be a bitter pill to swallow. But as the days turned into weeks and still no word came, I began to realize the true extent of Esther's stubbornness. She would rather suffer in her own misery than swallow her pride and seek my help. It was then that I knew my true revenge had begun. By refusing to play by Esther's rules, by denying her the control she so desperately craved, I was slowly but surely dismantling the very foundation of her power. And as Leah's bond with me grew stronger, her eyes opening to the truth of her grandmother's manipulations, I knew that my victory was all but assured. The tide had turned, and Esther's reign of terror was coming to an end, one painful step at a time. I've decided to live with Mom. She needs me, and I need her, Leah announced, her voice resolute as she began packing her belongings. I watched in stunned silence as my daughter methodically sorted through her things, separating the essentials from the clutter that had accumulated over the years. Her movements were purposeful, her expression one of steely determination. Are you sure about this, sweetheart? I asked, unable to keep the tremor of hope from my voice. Your grandmother won't make it easy for you. Leah paused, her gaze meeting mine with a newfound strength that took my breath away. I'm sure, Mom. After everything that's happened, I can't stay in that toxic environment any longer. It's time I stood up for myself. And for you. A lump formed in my throat as I pulled her into a fierce embrace, overwhelmed by a surge of pride and love. My daughter, once so conflicted and torn by the family drama, had finally found her voice, her inner strength. As we held each other, I couldn't help but think back to the dark days when Esther's grip on our lives had seemed unbreakable. Her manipulation had seeped into every corner of our existence, poisoning our relationships and robbing us of our dignity. But now the tide had turned. With Leah by my side, a united front against the forces that had sought to tear us apart, I felt a renewed sense of hope blossoming within me. Over the next few days, we settled into our new living arrangement, creating a sanctuary of peace and love in the midst of the chaos that had once consumed us. Leah's presence was a balm to my weary soul, a reminder that even in the darkest of times there was light to be found. And as we spent more time together, sharing our stories and supporting one another, I began to see the cracks forming in Esther's carefully constructed facade. Her hold on Adam, once so ironclad, was slowly but surely loosening. It started with small things, a missed phone call, a canceled dinner plan. But soon, the signs became more pronounced. Adam would show up at our door, his expression one of bewilderment and uncertainty, as if he were finally seeing the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. Mom, Grandma is different, he confided in me one evening, his brow furrowed in confusion. She's not the same person I thought she was. I nodded, understanding dawning in my heart. Esther's power had always been rooted in her ability to manipulate, to twist the truth to suit her own agenda. But with Leah and me standing firm, refusing to play her games, that power was slowly slipping away. As the weeks passed, the distance between Adam and his grandmother grew wider, a chasm of disillusionment that even Rebecca's subtle machinations couldn't bridge. And with each passing day, Stephen's life seemed to unravel further, his once proud demeanor crumbling under the weight of his own failures. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure. Part of me still loved the man I had once pledged my life to, the father of my children. But his actions had set in motion a chain of events that had nearly destroyed us all, and for that there could be no forgiveness. As I watched Leah blossom in our newfound sanctuary, her smile radiant and her spirit soaring, I knew that I had made the right choice. Our family had been fractured, broken by the toxic influences that had wormed their way into our lives. But now we were on the path to healing, to reclaiming the love and respect that had once bound us together. And as for Esther and Stephen, their fate was sealed. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now they would reap the bitter harvest of their actions. For in the end, love and truth would always triumph over manipulation and deceit.